I grew up in a small town. My mother worked 2 jobs to support us financially. When I was 7 years old, my dad left my mom and never came back. And my brother, unfortunately, has autism. Unlike others, he is actually a bit better in his condition, though he rarely talks or expresses like a normal person, but he can do his basic chores. Most of the day, he sits near the window and watches the world outside. This incident happened when I was 15 years old and my brother Jack was 11. My mom was working a night shift on a Thursday, so basically it was just me and my brother. We were kind of used to staying on our own at night because we had no other choice. Our neighbor next door was an alcoholic man. He had a son close to my age, but we often heard the man screaming at his son late at night. This particular night, I was sitting in our living room and watching TV. My brother was upstairs, lying on his bed. Suddenly, I heard chaos outside. I opened the door and saw 3 or 4 people had gathered in front of our neighbor's house. Within 5 to 7 minutes, a cop arrived. They sealed the entire house within seconds. Paramedics even came out and took a body on a stretcher. Behind them, I saw the father getting into an ambulance with a bleeding head. At first, I couldn't understand what was going on, but after hearing the conversations of the people gathering in front of the scene, it gave me a clear idea of what just happened. The father reported to 911 saying the homeless man broke into their house and tried to rob them. He hit the father with a baseball bat and badly injured him. As the father was already drunk, he fell to the floor in terrible pain. The father saw the son rushing towards the man to stop him. That was just when the man hit his son on the back of the head, and he fell to the floor. The man then stole his wallet, had a few electronics, and escaped the premises. The cops registered the father's complaint, but after suffering a huge blood clotting inside the brain, his son died in the hospital that night. Our entire town was shook in fear. No one expected such a terrible tragedy. The father arranged a small funeral for his son, and we attended. Everyone paid their condolences to him. The local sheriff assured him that they would find the guy who destroyed his family. My mom got utterly terrified and asked our grandma to watch us during our night shifts. Our neighbor, Mr. Feynman, had changed after his son's death. I often saw him sitting on the porch with a terrified face. I could tell that he was suffering the trauma of that night every single second. I mean, no doubt it would have been horrifying to watch your son dying on the floor at the hands of an intruder and not being able to do anything. Mr. Feynman stopped drinking after that instant. He pleaded with the sheriff to let him move out, as he was traumatized to live in that house, but the ongoing investigation compelled him to stay back. About a week after the incident, I started to notice some weird behavior in my brother. Even though we never discussed the death of the boy next door, I'm sure my brother must have realized something happened to our neighbors. One day, I was doing my schoolwork sitting in the living room. It was a boring, rainy afternoon. Jack was sitting next to the living window and watching the raindrops. Suddenly, I heard him chuckle. I looked at him and saw he was looking outside and laughing at something. The street and neighboring houses were visible from that window. I asked him, "What's so funny, Jack?" He chuckled and said, "Him," and pointed out the window. I immediately got up and walked towards the window. I stood next to my brother and looked out. Like I said, it was raining outside. The rain wasn't that heavy, which is why I could see the empty street clearly. As far as my eyes went, I didn't see a single living creature outside. I thought to myself Jack was probably imagining something, and I laughed at it. That night, when we all sat for dinner, Jack surprised all of us. My mom served him some food and placed the plate in front of him to eat, but Jack got up and slowly went to the kitchen. He then brought an extra plate and placed it on the table right beside him. "Why did you bring an extra plate?" My mom said. He looked beside him, as if someone was actually sitting on the chair next to him, then smiled on his own. I was feeling very odd about his behavior. I said, "Jack, Mom is asking you something." He then looked at our mom and said, "He's hungry, Mom." "Serve him too, he's hungry." My mom and I were absolutely stunned by Jack's behavior. My mom replied in a low, calm voice, "Who is he?" Jack chuckled and said, "My friend William." We just thought that, like every normal kid, Jack had an imaginary friend. So that night we didn't react to his sudden weird behavior, as he seemed happy, so we decided to play along with this. Jack often talked and smiled on his own. Whenever someone asked, he said he was talking to his friend William. Things never took a different turn, so Jack's behavior never worried me that way. That was until one night when I woke up in my room and heard footsteps going down the stairs. Now my mom slept downstairs, while my brother and I had a room upstairs. I got up from my bed and went to check on my brother. As I opened his bedroom door, I saw it was empty. I rushed downstairs and found the main door wide open. I freaked out and woke up my mom. When we came out of the house and started calling for my brother, my mom was about to cry when we heard a chuckling sound coming from our backyard. We ran there and saw Jack standing under a tree. He was facing his back at us. I said in a broken voice, "Jackie, are you all right?" He suddenly turned towards us. I've never seen my brother like this. His eyes were blood red, and his face was filled with pain. He said in a rough voice, "He's buried here," and then fainted on the ground. My brother caught a high fever the next morning. We called many doctors, but no one could tell exactly what was wrong with him. My mom became tense and worried. She hardly slept at night. One night, I saw my mom talking to our town sheriff standing at the doorway. After the sheriff left, I asked my mom what he was saying. My mom replied that the sheriff was going to close the next-door neighbor's case file. They investigated a lot, but couldn't get a hold of the intruder who broke into their house that night. Suddenly, my eyes widened. I asked my mom, Mom, what was the name of Mr. Feynman's son?" She replied, I think it was William." "Why do you ask?" My head started to throb in fear. Is this possible? All this time, the imaginary friend my brother was talking about was none other than our neighbor's dead son. I rushed to Jack's room. He was muttering something in his sleep. I got close to him and said, Jack, is William right here with you now? You're just going to have to trust me. I am not making this up at all." My brother suddenly opened his eyes and looked at the corner of the room. As I followed his eyes, my heart sunk in fear. A teenage boy was standing in the darkness of the corner of the room. His eyes were pale white with small pupils gushing out of them. His face was particularly visible as his entire body was in the darkness. Dried blood spots were visible on his left cheek and forehead. He then looked at me and my brother. Jackie got out of his bed slowly, then started to walk out of the room. I followed him downstairs. My mom was sitting in the living room. Suddenly seeing Jack walking on his own amidst this fever, she rushed to him. But before she could do anything else, I stopped her and told her everything. My mom and I came out of the house following Jack. Jack walked towards the backyard and stopped right in front of the tree. This tree was standing in the middle of our backyard and the backyard of our neighbor, Mr. Finian. Jack then pointed towards the ground beneath the tree and said, "Dig here," and then fainted to the ground. Without wasting a single second, I told my mom to call the sheriff. She did right away and came with 3 other police officers. People in our neighborhood gathered in our backyard out of curiosity. In front of everyone, the cops dug under the tree. What they found still disturbs me to this day. They found a bloody baseball bat wrapped in a bloody cloth buried under the tree. The mystery unfolded, shocking our town once again. Mr. Finian murdered his own son out of a fit of drunkenness. But to save himself from the law, he decided to make up the entire story of the robbery. He injured himself, willing to make the situation more believable, and even secretly buried the murder weapon. Without the murder weapon, no cops would have ever caught this man. That must have been why he wanted to move out so bad. The cops arrested him that day and took him into custody. Surprisingly, my brother Jack got completely better the very next day. We still live in that house, and I believe William has finally been able to rest in peace. I'm a 22-year-old male, and this encounter happened a few months ago. I live in an apartment just outside of my college campus. It's a fairly nice, newer apartment building, but the surrounding area is pretty shady. I don't spend any time around there, though. I just drive down to my campus and back. I hadn't had any bad experiences before this, so I did never find myself worried about much of anything. It was a Friday, and I'd just gotten back from school. I stayed late to get some extra studying done, so it was around 7 o'clock. I pulled into the small parking lot and headed inside the building. Walking inside, I went up the stairs to my room on the 4th floor and went inside, dropping my school bag right by the shoe rack I kept next to the door. I grabbed a pre-made salad from the fridge and sat on the couch to watch something while I ate. While scrolling through YouTube on the TV, a very loud, sudden thump came from the room below. It wasn't an alarming sound, necessarily, but more just surprising and out of nowhere. I listened for a moment, then continued with searching for a video to watch. A few minutes later, that same sound came from below me again. I paused the video and sat there, patiently waiting for it to happen again. I was more curious than anything. After a couple minutes, it happened again, but this time it was louder, and it even caused the walls to vibrate and shake. It was more obviously someone banging something against the wall, but I didn't know what or why. I waited again, but after a bit of no further sounds, I just continued about my night. I'm not sure how much time passed, but it wasn't too long, maybe 40 or 50 minutes, when I heard a knock by the front door. I was in the kitchen, which was right next to the door, so I knew the knock didn't come from my door, but most likely my neighbor's. Listening more carefully, I could hear a man mumbling something. It sounded like he was having a whole conversation with himself, just whispering and mumbling random sentences. I won't lie, it kind of creeped me out. When the mumbling stopped, I went over to the door and looked out the peephole to see if he was gone. The dude was standing in the dark, right in front of my door. He was looking down at the knob, as if contemplating whether or not to try opening it. I backed up, trying to quietly walk back to the couch to grab my phone just in case, but almost immediately, the guy banged on my door. He began mumbling again too, making me believe he was definitely on some hard drugs or something. I took my phone and held it tightly, unsure of what exactly my next move was going to be. I didn't know if he was just some harmless druggie or if he had worse intentions, but I felt fairly safe where I was, so I held off on doing anything. After maybe 30 seconds, though, the man banged on my door again, yelling something at me, though it was heavily slurred and unrecognizable. I ran to my bedroom and called the police. I didn't know what he wanted, but the fact that he wasn't leaving made me pretty scared of what he wanted. The operator said they were a few minutes out and asked if I wanted to stay on the line. I told them I was okay and hung up. Just then, the guy outside the door started banging even harder. He was definitely hitting the door with something, as it was too powerful of hits for it just to be his hands. It sounded more like he was trying to break the door down at this point. I grabbed a baseball bat from the corner of my room and prepared to hold my ground as the man continued with his efforts. This went on a while, until I saw the reflection of flashing blue lights outside the window. A minute later, an officer called out something in the stairway, making the man by the door stop. I heard them take the guy down, and I opened the front door to talk to the police. There were huge dents and cracks on the front, clearly having been smashed with some sort of hammer or even a crowbar. But what I found out next was extremely tragic and awful. The room below mine had a young lady living in it, who was found unconscious due to heavy blows to the head. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to recover and passed away at the hospital. Her front door was wide open, with no signs of damage, so it's likely she answered the door, unknowing of who was there. After beating the lady, he smashed several holes in the walls of her apartment using a large hammer that they found him holding while arresting him. The guy was heavily under the influence of drugs and alcohol, and apparently told the officers that he was looking for a stash hidden in the walls. There were no signs of anything being hidden in any of the rooms after being searched, so the guy likely just made it up in his head while drugged up. What's terrifying is that he was really close to doing the same thing to me as he did to the lady below me. I feel really bad for her though, probably just being nice and opening the door. No idea that her fate was behind it. I had just gotten back from vacation with a few of my friends that I've known since high school. Most of us live far away from each other, so meeting up once a year is how we stay connected. Anyway, I'd been gone for a week and was a bit exhausted and looking forward to just resting at home for the weekend before I had to go back to work. When I got inside, I didn't even bother to unpack anything. I walked over to the kitchen and got a couple snacks to substitute for my dinner, then turned off the lights and laid down on the couch. I didn't bother with the TV either. I planned on just eating and scrolling on my phone, then falling asleep. After a while, my eyes got heavy, and I put my phone down on the coffee table and closed my eyes. It was late, though I don't recall ever looking at the exact time before I fell asleep. Sometime later in the night, though, I woke up. It didn't seem to be for any reason as I didn't hear anything, but my eyes shot open and my head was in alert mode. It was a strange feeling, like something had to have woken me up to make me feel like this. I sat up and rubbed my eyes, then grabbed my phone and got up to go to bed, figuring maybe my brain felt weird about me sleeping in the living room. Walking over to the stairs, I saw the back porch light was still on. This wasn't shocking, as I'd left it on while I went on vacation in hopes to mislead any possible robbers, as it would look like someone was home. As I flicked the light off though, my eyes shifted to the back door. It was unlocked. I immediately got a bad feeling in my gut, staring at the door. I thought maybe I was crazy and pulled the door, but sure enough, it opened. I quickly shut it and locked it. Had I forgotten to lock it before leaving? There was no way. I checked every door and window multiple times before leaving. I went around and turned on all the downstairs lights and looked around, trying to spot anything missing, but nothing that I could notice was gone. Really unsure about the situation I was in, I went back to the door and tested the lock. With the door locked, I was able to pull it open. I looked closer and could tell that a part of the latch was broken off. There wasn't a single part of me that wasn't terrified in that moment. I knew the chances of whoever had broken in to still be in the house were slim, but I could not sleep until I was sure. This was the exact time when I should have called the cops. I don't know if I was just too tired to think straight, or if I was just really confident that nobody was still there, but I went upstairs to check the rooms. Switching on the hallway light, all the doors were closed, just as I'd left them. My master bedroom was on the far end, with a bathroom and spare bedroom before it. I checked the bathroom first, opening the door and taking a quick look. It was empty. No signs of anything out of place. Then I walked over to the spare bedroom. I used this room mainly for storage, so there were a lot of boxes and furniture scattered around. As I walked through the room, looking behind the boxes, I suddenly heard very quiet, soft footsteps coming from the master bedroom. They went across the room into the door, then stopped. It was as if me and this intruder were just listening, waiting for someone to do something. The anticipation and anxiety made fear rush through my whole body. I could hear my heart pounding as I stood in the middle of the room, staring at the doorway leading to the hall. Then I heard the master bedroom door creak open. Another second of silence passed before loud footsteps sprinted down the hall and a figure ran past the doorway. I just froze. Couldn't get myself to move or anything, just completely frozen, listening to my heart beating rapidly as the footsteps ran through the house and out the back door. Still in a state of shock, I pulled my phone out and called the police. This was one of those home-breaking cases that likely had a much more horrifying plot than just a simple robbery. Whoever it was didn't take anything. Police found no signs of someone having stayed there for long either, so they had to have broken in earlier that day. Whoever the intruder was somehow knew I was coming back that day and tried to break in discreetly so that I wouldn't notice when I got home. Then they went upstairs and hid in my bedroom all night, waiting for me to come in without expecting anything. And who knows what they planned to do if I walked through that door.